Hello, it's Phillip Taylor from Richmond Green Chambers speaking. I'm talking about this book, Gatley on Libel and Slander. A new edition, just came out at the end of 2008. It's now called the 11th edition. It's been written by Patrick Milmo and Horton Rogers. Horton Rogers, I think many people will know from his textbook. The Common Law Library has excelled again. Sweet and Maxwell have produced this book. It's a standard approach. You've got a huge amount of cases at the beginning. Then you've got the standard referencing at the sides, plus the footnotes and everything else. Then at the back you've got an excellent index and in fact some appendices as well. So it's certainly an excellent book. About 1,500 pages in all. I've got the flyer here, which is a sort of purple banding this time around, and my review on Flickr, which I think many people will find of interest. The law of defamation, of course, is a fascinating subject for students and for practitioners. The review title I've given it for the journals and the internet is, I've said, Where Reputation and Case Law Collide. Because clearly this is an area of law which is of interest to many people, and it's also because everybody has a reputation. That's why the book, originally written in 1924 by Clement Gatley, although specifically designed for the practitioner, should obviously inevitably today hold some fascination for non-practitioners as well, especially if they, like journalists and other media types for example, are concerned with the issues involved, and they're fairly broad, fairly wide. At the moment, therefore, following some high-profile cases, much of the world is actually reviewing reputation, because of the internet of course, and how much it's worth in cash in the High Court in London. Defamation, as everybody is I'm sure aware, comprises both libel and slander. The torts, therefore, which this book is primarily concerned with, and which obviously protect the reputation of the individual. Now we know obviously that slander tends to be of lesser importance today than obviously specifically libel, because of the internet and the broadcast media itself. Now the two editors, Milmo and Rogers, point out in the introduction that the book also deals, amongst a myriad other related matters, with, quote, the closely related tort commonly known as malicious falsehood, with libel as a crime and with the complaints procedures alternate to a civil action which are open to a defamed person. Now it sounds a bit heavy, that, but what we're talking about here is the in-depth coverage we have contained in the book, which includes an examination of substantive and procedural law and gives guidance on recent cases, developments in principles and the relevant legislation, and any changes in the procedural aspects of practice. But as I'm sure you're all aware, it's the very basics of libel itself which are the subject of most interest. It's a pivotal work, now in its 11th edition, and it's an indicator of the priority, in my view, that individuals as well as organisations have attached to the matter of reputation down the centuries. The table of cases, for instance, at the beginning, is actually 130 pages long and includes every important decision you're likely to consider since about 1670. And this edition, of course, was published, as I say, about the end of November 2008. And we've therefore got the latest developments from the Mosley and News Group newspapers case as one example, and that's still sort of running through, where obviously Mosley started not by using defamation, but confidentiality. There are a lot of other cases which are covered. Jameel and Wall Street is a particularly important one. There are a lot of other ones, obviously, which I'm sure many readers will be aware of. Let me just talk, though, briefly about the foreword and Jameel itself, which was affirmed by the House of Lords, the decision. And obviously they affirmed it in a manner which emphasises the importance of freedom of expression on matters of public concern, when they're saying we've also begun a journey along a byway of responsible journalism, adding, say the editors, the following: in the form of a doctrine of reportage, though at present it's not easy to state its effects. And the problem is, it's rather like David Mellor's concept of drinking in the last chance saloon, because if something isn't done before too long, obviously government will step in and legislate, and you've got the big problem, the human rights issue of privacy versus expression. And of course you've got Mr. Justice Eadie's decision, which doesn't sit too well with journalists and the freedom of expression. Let me go on to that in a bit more detail, because the debate continues and is raging on at the moment about this business of privacy and freedom of speech. Milner and Rogers refer to their concern about the, quote, dangers of overprotection of freedom of expression at the expense of reputation. Well, that's a matter of personal opinion, surely. While I understand their position, I'm one of those folk who would not be comfortable in agreeing that so fundamental a freedom as freedom of expression could be overprotected, although I'm also aware, as is everyone, that it's all too frequently abused. Now, the issue of responsible journalism, I'm all for it. It would certainly cut down a number of actions for defamation. Now, the appearance of the new Gatley in this sort of brand new edition is very welcome. It's structured in a familiar way, so people will be used to it. The work more than lives up, of course, to its current reputation as an authoritative and all-encompassing guide to the law in this area. It also contains, of course, a wealth of practical features, including what I mentioned earlier, the table of cases, then all the other things, statutes, SIs, CPR, PDs, national legislative measures, then the European international conventions and so forth. And there are forms and precedents which of course are very useful for everyday use, and that's what we've come to expect with the Sweet and Maxwell Common Law Library. Just so you don't miss the latest information in this topical and fast-moving area of law, obviously Sweet and Maxwell have their supplement service, which is regularly updating what's happening, and as soon as they're published, obviously you get the most up-to-date information possible. And certainly the Mosley case is one that's going to run on and on. Whether we ever get a satisfactory solution to the collision under the Human Rights Act between privacy and expression, I don't know. The one thing that may well happen, though, is we may have further legislation. So therefore, to sum up, Clement Gatley's work on reputation and law has the highest of reputations, in my view, as a leading title in the Common Law series, so you defame it at your peril. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.